Hello. Hello. This is Stories for Kids with Morel. And yes, I've got my story bell. Ding-a-ding. Ding-a-ding, ding-a-ding, and ding-a-ding. And my birdie is along with me. Hello, birdie. Hello, birdie. Okay, fine. This is a continuation of the story, The Ice Dragon and the North Pole. I've done part 1, so I'm now back, part 2, for the end of the story about the Ice Dragon and the North Pole. So, last words, and by the way, I hope that everyone is fine. I hope that you're fine and that you are sitting comfortably. This last part of the story is a little long. It's not short, but it's not very long. So the last part about George and Jane, I think I said, and George and Jane shot right into it because they could not stop themselves, and the snow was soft, so that they went in up to their very ears. So let me continue with the story. When they had picked themselves out and thumped each other on the back to get rid of the snow, they shaded their eyes and looked, and there, right in front of them, was the wonder of wonders, the North Pole, towering high and white and glistening like an ice lighthouse. And it was quite close, so that you had to put your head as far back as it would go and farther before you could see the high top of it. It was made entirely of ice. Well, you will hear grown-up people talk a great deal of nonsense about the North Pole. And when you are grown up, it is even possible that you may talk nonsense about it yourself. The most unlikely things do happen. But deep down, in your heart, you must always remember that the North Pole is made of clear ice and could not possibly, if you come to think of it, be made of anything else. All around the pole, making a bright ring about it, were hundreds of little fires, and the flames of them did not flicker and twist, but went up, blue and green and rosy and straight, like the stalks of dream lilies. Jane said so, but George said they were as straight as ramrods. And these flames were the Aurora Borealis, which the children had seen as far as Forest Hill. The ground was quite flat and covered with smooth, hard snow, which shone and sparkled like the top of a birthday cake that has been iced at home. The ones done at the shops do not shine and sparkle because they mix flour with the ice in sugar. Oh, it's like a dream, said Jane. And George said, it is the North Pole. Just think of the fuss people always make about getting here, and it was no trouble at all, really. I dare say lots of people have gotten here, said Jane dismally. It's not the getting here. I see that. It's the getting back again. Perhaps no one will ever know that we have been here, and the robins will cover us with leaves and nonsense, said George. There aren't any robins, and there aren't any leaves. It's just the North Pole, that's all. And I've found it, and now I shall try to climb up and plant the British flag on the top. My handkerchief will do. And if it really is the North Pole, my pocket compass Uncle James gave me will spin around, and then I shall know. Come on. So Jane came on, and when they got close to the clear, tall, beautiful flames, they saw that there was a great queer-shaped lump of ice all around the bottom of the pole. Clear, smooth, shining ice that was deep, beautiful Prussian blue, like icebergs in the thick parts, and all sorts of wonderful, glimmery, shimmery, changing colours in the thin parts, like the cut glass chandeliers in Grandmamma's house in London. It is a very curious shape, said Jane. It's almost like she moved back a step to get a better view of it. It's almost like a dragon. It's much more like the lamppost on the Thames embankment, said George, who had noticed a curly thing like a tail that went twisting up the North Pole. Oh, George, cried Jane, it is a dragon. I can see its wings. Whatever shall we do? And sure enough, it was a dragon. A great, shining, winged, scaly, clawy, big-mouthed dragon made of pure ice. It must have gone to sleep, curled around the hole where the warm steam used to come up from the middle of the earth. And then, when the earth got colder and the column of steam froze and was turned into the North Pole, the dragon must have frozen in his sleep. Frozen too hard to move, and there he stayed. And though he was very terrible, he was very beautiful too. Jane said so. But George said, "Oh, don't bother. I'm thinking how to get onto the pole and try the compass without waking the brute." The dragon certainly was beautiful, with his deep, clear Prussian blueness and his rainbow-coloured glitter. And rising from within the cold coil of the frozen dragon, the North Pole shot up like a pillar made of one great diamond. And every now and then it cracked a little from sheer cold. The sound of the cracking was the only thing that broke the great white silence in the midst of which the dragon lay like an enormous jewel. And the straight flames went up all around him like the stalks of tall lilies. And as the children stood there, looking at the most wonderful sight their eyes had ever seen, there was a soft padding of feet and a hurry, scurry behind them. And from the outside darkness, beyond the flame stalks, came a crowd of little brown creatures, running, jumping, scrambling, tumbling, head over heels and on all fours, and some even walking on their heads. They joined hands as they came near the fires and danced around in a ring. It's bears, said Jane. "I know it is. Oh, how I wish we hadn't come, and my boots are so wet." The dancing ring broke up suddenly, and the next moment hundreds of furry arms clutched at George and Jane, and they found themselves in the middle of a great, soft, heaving crowd of little fat people in brown fur dresses, and the white silence was quite gone. "Bears indeed," cried a shrill voice. "You'll wish we were bears before you've done with us." Well, this sounded very dreadful that Jane began to cry. Up to now, the children had only seen the most beautiful and wondrous things. But now they began to be sorry they had done what they were told not to, and the difference between lawn and grass did not seem so great as it had at Forest Hill. Directly Jane began to cry, all the brown people started back. No one cries in the Arctic regions for fear of being struck by the frost. So that these people had never seen anyone cry before. "Don't cry for real," whispered George, "or you'll get chilblains in your eyes. But pretend to howl. It frightens them." So Jane went on pretending to howl, and the real crying stopped. It always does when you begin to pretend. You try it. Then, speaking very loud so as to be heard over the howls of Jane, George said, "Yeah, who's afraid?" "We are George and Jane. Who are you?" "We are the seal-skin dwarfs," said the brown people, twisting their furry bodies in and out of the crowd like the changing glass in kaleidoscopes. "We are very precious and expensive, for we are made throughout of the very best seal skin." "And what are those fires for?" bellowed George, for Jane was crying louder and louder. "Those," shouted the dwarfs, coming a step nearer, "are the fires we make to thaw the dragon. He's frozen now, so he sleeps, curled up around the pole. But when we have thawed him with our fires, he will wake up and go and eat everybody in the world except us." "Whatever do you want him to do that for?" yelled George. "Oh, just for spite," bawled the dwarfs carelessly, as if they were saying just for fun. Jane stopped crying to say, "You are heartless." "No, we aren't," they said. "Our hearts are made of the finest seal skin, just like little fat seal skin purses." And they all came a step nearer. They were very fat and round. Their bodies were like seal skin jackets on a very stout person. Their heads were like seal skin muffs, their legs were like seal skin boas, and their hands and feet were like seal skin tobacco pouches, and their faces were like seal faces, inasmuch as they too were covered with seal skin. "Thank you so much for telling us," said George. "Good evening. Keep on howling, Jane." But the dwarfs came a step nearer, muttering and whispering. Then the muttering stopped, and there was a silence so deep that Jane was afraid to howl in it. But it was a brown silence, and she had liked the white silence better. Then the chief dwarf came quite close and said, "What's that on your head?" And George felt it was all up, for he knew it was his father's sealskin cap. The dwarf did not wait for an answer. "It's made of one of us," he screamed, "or else one of the seals, our poor relations. Boy, now your fate is sealed." Looking at the wicked seal faces all around them, George and Jane felt that their fate was sealed indeed. The dwarfs seized the children in their furry arms. George kicked, but it is no use kicking sealskin, and Jane howled, but the dwarfs were getting used to that. They climbed up the dragon's side and dumped the children down on his icy spine, with their backs against the North Pole. You have no idea how cold it was, the kind of cold that makes you feel small and prickly inside your clothes and makes you wish you had 20 times as many clothes to feel small and prickly inside of. The sealskin dwarfs tied George and Jane to the North Pole, and as they had no ropes, they bound them with snow wreaths, which are very strong when they are made in the proper way. And they heaped up the fires very close and said, "Now the dragon will get warm, and when he get warm, he will wake. And when he wakes, he will be hungry. And when he is hungry, he will begin to eat. And the first thing he will eat will be you." The little, sharp, many-coloured flames sprang up like the stalk of dream lilies, but no heat came to the children, and they grew colder and colder. "We shan't be very nice when the dragon does eat us, that's one comfort," said George. "We shall be turned into ice long before that." Suddenly, there was a flapping of wings, and the white grouse perched on the dragon's head and said, "Can I be of any assistance?" Now, by this time the children were so cold, so very, very cold, that they had forgotten everything but that, and they could say nothing else. So the white grouse said, "One moment. I am only too grateful for this opportunity of showing my sense of your manly conduct about the firework." And the next moment, there was a soft, whispering rustle of wings overhead, and then fluttering slowly, softly down, came hundreds and thousands of little white fluffy feathers. They fell on George and Jane like snowflakes, and like flakes of fallen snow lying one above another, they grew into a thicker and thicker covering, so that presently the children were buried under a heap of white feathers, and only their faces peeped out. "Oh, you dear, good white grouse, kind grouse," said Jane. "But you'll be cold yourself, won't you, now you've given us all your pretty dear feathers?" The white grouse laughed, and his laugh was echoed by thousands of kind, soft bird voices. Did you think all those feathers came out of one breast? There are hundreds and hundreds of us here, and every one of us can spare a little ruft of soft breast feathers to help keep two kind little hearts warm. Thus spoke the grouse, who certainly had very pretty manners. So now the children snuggled under the feathers and were warm. And when the seal-skin dwarfs tried to take the feathers away, the grouse and his friends flew in their faces with flappings and screams and drove the dwarfs back. They are cowardly folk. The dragon had not moved yet, but then he might at any moment get warm enough to move, and though George and Jane were now warm, they were not comfortable nor easy in their minds. They tried to explain to the grouse, but though he is polite, he's not clever, and he only said, "You've got a warm nest, and we'll see that no one takes it from you. What more can you possibly want?" Just then came a new, strange, jerky fluttering of wings, far softer than the grouse's. And George and Jane cried out together, "Oh, do mind your wings in the fires!" For they saw at once that it was the great white Arctic moth. "What's the matter?" he asked, settling on the dragon's tail. So they told him. "Seal skin, are they?" said the moth. "Just you wait a minute." He flew off, very crookedly, dodging the flames, and presently he came back, and there were so many moths with him that it was as if a live sheet of white wingedness was suddenly drawn between the children and the stars. And then the doom of the bad seal-skin dwarfs fell suddenly on them. For the great sheet of winged whiteness broke up and fell as snowfalls, and it fell upon the seal-skin dwarfs, and every snowflake of it was a live, fluttering, hungry moth that buried its greedy nose deep in the seal-skin fur. Grown-up people will tell you that it is not moths, but moths' children who eat fur. But this is only when they are trying to deceive you. When they are not thinking about you, they say, "I fear the moths have got at my ermine tippet," or "Your poor Aunt Emma had a lovely sable cloak, but it was eaten by moths." And now there were more moths than have ever been together in this world before, all settling on the seal-skin dwarfs. The dwarfs did not see their danger till it was too late. Then they called for camphor and bitter apple and oil of lavender and yellow soap and borax, and some of the dwarfs even started to get these things. But long before any of them could get to the chemist, all was over. The moths ate and ate and ate till the seal-skin dwarfs, being seal-skin throughout, even to the empty hearts of them, were eaten down to the very life. And they fell, one by one, on the snow, and so came to their end. And all around the North Pole, the snow was brown, with their flat, bare pelts. "Oh, thank you, darling Arctic moth, thank you," cried Jane. You are good. I do hope you haven't eaten enough to disagree with you afterward." Millions of moth voices answered, with laughter as soft as moth wings. We should be a poor set of fellows if we couldn't overeat ourselves once in a while to oblige a friend. And off they all fluttered. And the white grouse flew off, and the seal-skinned dwarfs were all dead, and the fires went out, and George and Jane were left alone in the dark with the dragon. "Oh dear," said Jane. "This is the worst of all." "We've no friends left to help us," said George. He never thought that the dragon himself might help them. But then, that was an idea that would never have occurred to any boy. It grew colder and colder and colder. And even under the grouse feathers the children shivered. Then, when it was so cold that it could not manage to be any colder without breaking the thermometer, it stopped. And then the dragon uncurled himself from around the North Pole and stretched his long icy length over the snow and said, "This is something like how faint those fires did make me feel." The fact was, the seal-skinned dwarfs had gone the wrong way to work. The dragon had been frozen so long that now he was nothing but solid ice all through, and the fires only made him feel as if he were going to die. But when the fires were out, he felt quite well and very hungry. He looked around for something to eat, but he never noticed George and Jane because they were frozen to his back. He moved slowly off, and the snow reeds that bound the children to the pole gave way with a snap. And there was the dragon, crawling south, with Jane and George on his great, scaly, icy, shining back. Of course, the dragon had to go south if he went anywhere, because when you get to the North Pole, there is no other way to go. The dragon rattled and tinkled as he went, exactly like the cut glass chandelier when you touch it, as you are strictly forbidden to do. Of course, there are a million ways of going south from the North Pole. So you will own that it was lucky for George and Jane when the dragon took the right way and suddenly got his heavy feet on the great slide. Off he went, full speed, between the starry lamps, toward Forest Hill and Crystal Palace. "He's going to take us home," said Jane. "Oh, he is a good dragon. I am glad." George was rather glad too, though neither of the children felt at all sure of their welcome, especially as their feet were wet, and they were bringing a strange dragon home with them. They went very fast, because dragons can go uphill as easily as down. You would not understand why if I told you, because you are only in long division at present. Yet, if you want me to tell you so that you can show off to other children, I will. It is because dragons can get their tails into the fourth dimension and hold on there And when you can do that, everything is easy. The dragon went very fast, only stopping to eat the collector and the sportsman, who was still struggling to go up the slide vainly because they had no tails and had never even heard of the fourth dimension. When the dragon got to the end of the slide, he crawled very slowly across the dark field, beyond the field, where there was a bonfire, next to the next door garden at Forest Hill. He went slower and slower, and in the bonfire field he stopped altogether, and because the Arctic regions had not got down so far as that, and because the bonfire was very hot, the dragon began to melt and melt and melt. And before the children knew what he was doing, they found themselves sitting in a large pool of water, and their boots were as wet, and there was not a bit of dragon left. So they went indoors. Of course, some grown-up or other noticed at once that the boots of George and Jane were wet and muddy, and that they had both been sitting down in a very damp place. So they were sent to bed immediately. It was long past their time anyhow. Now, if you are of an inquiring mind, not at all a nice thing in a little child who reads fairy tales, you will want to know how it is that since the seal-skin dwarfs have all been killed, and the fires all being let out, the Aurora Borealis shines on cold nights as brightly as ever. My dears, I do not know. I am not too proud to own that there are some things I know nothing about, and this is one of them. But I do know that whoever has lighted those fires again, it is certainly not the seal-skin dwarfs. They were all eaten by the moths, and moth-eaten things are of no use, even to light fires. Oh, wow. That is the end of the story of the ice dragon and the North Pole. I hope you enjoy the story. I will, Birdie, did you enjoy the story? Tell me, Birdie. Is that a yes? Yes. All right, thank you, Birdie. All right, this is a Stories for Kids with me, Morel. Stories for Kids with me, Morel. And I will be back. With other stories. So be good. Be very, very good. Be very, very good. And I will see you soon. Watch out for the next video. Okay, Stories for Kids. I'll see you then. Bye. Take care. Bye.